Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the show. Today we have Ryan Janeway, who has built and sold 4 companies in the medical software and services space. His current companies include RHJ Enterprises, MediPro Direct, and Alliance DNA Laboratory. Outside of the office, Ryan is an avid learner, basketball player, paintballer, mountain biker, traveler, and hiker. He currently has 5 children and lives with his family in Alpine, Utah. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. We're talking before the show. We've got a couple connections in the BYU network, and
Absolutely.
You're doing a lot of, it sounds like great stuff there with BYU and the entrepreneurship program. So excited we could kind of come full circle and get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
Well, first thing I asked my guests, Ryan, is to talk a little bit about your upbringing. So maybe, childhood years or formative teenage years that influenced you or molded you to kind of create who you are today.
Yeah, thanks. Chase, great to be here and talk a little bit about that. It's fun to be involved both at BYU and just in entrepreneurial, world in general, because there is just so much kind of unique application of time and energy and talent. And that did start for me at a young age. I have a mother who built a number of companies in the real estate space, and kind of always raised us with a sense that anything's possible if you want to do it. I think there's some significant value to that, just believing that you can do anything. So I grew up in Oregon, spent most of my years there. I was born in Canada, in Alberta, but then grew up in Oregon and raised around just west of the Portland area. My dad was an Intel guy, and as I say, my mother was really in real estate. And so 5 siblings. I'm the second oldest, an older sister, 2 younger brothers, and a younger sister. And so kind of all of us grew up in that area. Then I served a mission in Maryland for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And for those familiar with that, that's kind of an entrepreneurial experience itself. Not that you don't have a lot of direction, but there's a lot of opportunity to learn about structure and leadership and working and self-motivation and self-directing. And I think a sense that life is what you make it, right? That it can be as good or as bad of an experience as you want it to be. And I think that goes along with this sense that that you can become anything is this fact that the baseline of that is you wake up every morning kind of deciding what that is and then making it possible. Right. So that was my experience kind of growing up.
Yeah, love that. And you mentioned your mother. What kind of real estate was she doing?
Yeah, she did. She's a broker, but the businesses were around property management initially, and then she was involved as a C-level person helping build an audio company, actually. So that was kind of totally different. But that was after I'd left the home. So when I was younger, it was mostly in property management.
Yeah, that's great. So going into your college experience, undergrad at BYU, correct?
Yeah, correct.
So what was your mindset watching your mother, your father, and kind of maybe seeing the contrast, Intel and more the entrepreneur? I mean, what did you want to get out of school going into it?
Yeah, I've kind of always been just a direct line person. So, it was just the thought that you do really well with what you have in front of you. Everything's your best effort. So, in high school, I did well. I graduated near the top of my class. I came to BYU a semester early, graduated kind of Christmas time, my senior year, and then came early. Got about a year in before my mission. And the goal there was just to kind of explore what was out there, what really clicked for me in terms of comfort level. And I've always enjoyed math. And so finance was a good piece because it was in the math space, but also a lot broader application, I think, for me. So it led me to the business school. And I really didn't know, honestly, going in what I wanted to do out of it. I didn't go in saying I'm going to build a company or anything else. But I guess the other piece of that worth noting, when I was growing up, my only jobs were self-directed work. So I'm a professional magician, and I paid for a lot of college doing magic shows for the university and other universities. In high school, I worked for a magic shop and went around selling myself to senior care centers and others. So I did a lot of kind of self-marketing from the time I was 12 years old, doing these magic shows around. And I think that actually had a really valuable, teaching kind of experience for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever do magic with your kids anymore?
Absolutely. Yeah. When they were growing up, it was always a once a year thing for their school. So until they get to junior high where, it's not as cool to have dad show up. But yeah, so now it's nieces and nephews and occasionally people at church if they've got grandkids over or something with a big event. I'll go and do a couple shows a year.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's fun.
Did you work at all while you're at BYU? Was it doing magic?
Just doing magic shows. Okay. A little bit, maybe 3 years in. Actually, a buddy of mine at BYU, Spencer Millerberg, who we talked about early, before the show, found a job doing some real estate locally, helping sell some new condos down by BYU, and said, "Hey, come work with me here." So that was kind of the only school job that I had.
There you go. So, and was it finance then that you studied?
Yeah.
You mentioned? Okay. So maybe tell us a little bit about, your early career coming out of school or towards the end of your schooling. I looked through your resume or LinkedIn, saw you were at Intermountain Paramedical, or you started that. So tell us a little bit about what those next steps out of school were.
Yeah. So as it goes, I met a young woman. I bought a condo. I came home from my mission. I bought a condominium and met a gal who was out doing mobile medical testing, doing blood draws and other things. And this was late 90s. So everything was scheduled in a book, handwritten. And it was just extremely ineffective. And so as we started dating and later were married, I thought, we can do a better job with this, right? We can do more. And so that was sort of the foundation of Intermountain Paramedical, to create a web-based scheduling system and then turn that into a platform for like case management for kind of a local mobile testing company. And that allowed me to get involved with the early entrepreneurial program at BYU. At that point, they had one, maybe two individuals who were mentoring. And I got involved with one and picked up a scholarship at BYU for entrepreneurialism. Again, earlier, so much easier to get, I think, at that point. And that allowed me to do this little bit of work with new condos and then spend the rest of my time building this mobile medical testing company. The great part about that was a lot of the work that I was doing at school had immediate application. So I'm doing a marketing class and I can apply that to real life, marketing work that we're doing for the company, or business classes for Excel or other things, and trying to build tools for managing the company, right? So there's a lot of direct application, which was great. Working with the entrepreneurial group there was great, just for some advice from folks who'd been, decades down the road. And part of why I'm so committed now to being involved on the other side of that and trying to help others coming out. And that program has grown so much and is really advanced now. I mean, one of the best in the country. But so that was my experience. At the end of school in 2003, it gave us a chance, my wife and I at that point, a chance to then sell that company for, that's the thing. You can end college with, owing some university $100,000. We ended college without debt and sold our first company for $250,000. So, I graduate with a nice little payday. And I think for any of these young entrepreneurs who are looking at an opportunity, do I build something? It doesn't always work out like that or that quickly or anything else. And those are small numbers, right? But at 23 years old, coming out of college with enough money to kind of start the next thing for me and self-manage that, it was a great opportunity.
It's amazing. And as I've done this podcast, one thing that I've noticed with a lot of the individuals I sit across from is this ability to just go and do it. Even during school, for me, I wasn't very entrepreneur minded until later in life, but I feel like the fact that you said, "Hey, here's an idea," my girlfriend or your soon-to-be wife was doing something, you thought about it and you thought about a concept and then you went and executed. You found the right resources, you found the right people. And I think that's the differentiator is a lot of people have good ideas, but not everyone's willing to just, go and take action. So that's amazing. Kudos to you, Ryan. So who ended up buying that company? What was the buyer?
Yeah, just a private individual.
Okay.
So at that point, it was doing fairly well. We had a nice network of nurses and mobile phlebotomists, and we're doing primarily work for life insurance companies, so life insurance blood draws, and just put it out with a business broker on the local market, and had a local guy. pick it up and run it for, I think he ran it for another 5 or 6 years and then sold it. So it did well. Yeah.
There you go. Okay. So here you are, 23 years old, you graduated, you have $250,000. You just sold your first company. So yeah, what's your mindset at this point? What were you thinking as the next step?
Yeah, it's always, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking is the next step, right? So I didn't necessarily have a trajectory other than we wanted to do something bigger and better. The challenge that we'd learned in the process of building the first company was in the mobile blood draw space, there are very few companies that are competing, large organizations like Quest Diagnostics and others of that nature. But for smaller non-public organizations, it's a chicken and the egg because you've got to have a network in order to get, got to have a national network to get national business. You've got to have national business to be able to hire independent contractors that do the work, or else they don't have anything to do, right? So, and then in the middle of that, the only way to really make that happen is a very expensive technology system. And so for me, I thought, well, let's just dive in and see if we can build a technology for a national platform that becomes something that individual organizations, small mobile phlebotomy groups, regional or local, can utilize. And then by giving them a technology platform to make them successful, they kind of self-develop our national network. They come in to use the platform for fairly inexpensive cost, develop our national network, and then we can go after national business. So that was kind of what developed in my mind as we were starting to create that. What that meant was that I essentially self-funded developing that software for 2 years without income. Mm-hmm. Ironically, I never really thought about not having income because we had this money from what we'd sold, so it was irrelevant from that standpoint. But looking back at it, I thought, that was kind of risky, and we just bootstrapped it that way. As we got rolling on it and got close to market, building the technology, I started reaching out to a few of our close associates just with business we'd done from the first company, primarily customers. And there was one who said, I like where you're headed. We'll put some money into it and invest it about another $250,000. So that helped us get everything we needed to go to market in 2006. So between selling and building for a couple of years, 2006 is when we started the next company, which was MediPro Direct. And that is one that I still run. We now have the 4th largest phlebotomy network in the country. We do work for clinical trial organizations, some of the largest in the world. Still life insurance carriers, a lot of specialty labs. And so that vision, turned out to work out, but it's through a lot of iterations, as you can imagine. And in the process, we use that technology platform to found a number of other companies, like a genetic testing company, direct to consumer, that we ended up selling after about 3 years. We built it and sold it off, and then using that as a platform for even Alliance DNA Lab, which is Vanguard Genetics, which we continue to run. So that became just a nice kind of base technology platform, and kind of just look ahead and say, let's do the next thing we can.
Yeah, that's amazing. So this is 2003. I mean, nowadays, and honestly, I don't know much about software engineering or building out,
Sure.
A platform, but I mean, now it's like AI can write you whatever. But I mean, how did you actually go about executing on creating a platform, a technology-based platform in 2003? Was it hiring engineers? Was it outsourcing, to other groups and overseas? Like, how did you actually go about creating the technology?
Yeah, initially it was, we found an office to run our first company, and the office next door was run by a software developer who ended up being a really talented full stack guy. So I think we just got lucky. We developed a relationship. He continues to be my chief technical officer. And again, because he understood both the back and the front end, he started building on it with some of the core guys he had. He was early in creating his development company, and so was hungry for business as well. So we were able to do it at a fraction of the cost of probably what it should have cost us, right? Again, just kind of fortuitously. And then continued to, I think it's also sort of the arrogance or ignorance of youth, believing that we can create something that can be nationally competitive with very little funding. I mean, if I looked at it today to create a plan and somebody brought it to me, I'd say that's never going to work. And that's the irony of it, right? Because I think that's true a lot of times as people start garage companies or anything else, as you look at it and say, this plan isn't well thought through and it's kind of terrible. But the reality is that it works if you're willing to just keep pushing and fighting and working. And, I don't buy this idea that there's a 5-step process to make it work, or you develop a business plan. And that's changed over time anyway, right? We don't really develop big business plans for the students at BYU. We develop these kind of living concept plans because things change so quickly. But you have to be willing to just kind of keep pushing and keep fighting and find a way.
Yeah, makes sense. That's great. And so for the listeners, you said phlebotomy a couple of times. Maybe explain a little bit more in depth what that is and what you guys were doing.
Yeah, sorry, that's a term that I use so much anymore that I just sort of assume that everybody knows it. But it's just blood drawing is all phlebotomy is.
Okay.
Maybe it sounds bigger, but drawing blood. So we do specimen collection all over the country with MediPro. Clinical trials, there's a lot of paperwork, maybe it's medical questionnaires, different specimens. I mean, blood is the easy one to talk about, but you're doing saliva screens or DNA screens for our other company or just other types of specimens. We do work for NFL and NBA and others doing monitored collections for COVID. We did a lot of that. Now it's like a monitored urine screen for drug testing and things.
Got it. Okay. So is MediPro Direct, is it the software in the back end, or are you actually sending, nurses, facilitators to draw blood out of somebody's arm, or is it a third party? Like how are you integrating?
Yeah. So the software is the back end platform for case management, and we use it as a service to sell to other local or regional phlebotomy organizations, right? Blood collection organizations, but we also run the company that goes out and does the service. So we have a national company, and then we work with regional companies either to send them business as subcontractors or to provide them with software or both.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. So you mentioned the investment from one of your prior customers, $250,000. How much do you think it took all in for those 3 years to get this off the ground?
It was close to that, probably $400,000 or $500,000. To develop it, hire the staff we needed. There was a lot of data entry when you're dealing with doing these blood draws for life insurance companies. Each one has a state-specific forms, and so you're creating 1,000 forms for 50 different states, or 1,000 different organizations, 50 different states, and uploading all that manually. And we've automated a lot of that now over the years, but at that point, it was just a lot of data creation, a lot of kind of working slowly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think today, do you think you could do what you did then again today? Given kind of where technology's evolved, the competitive nature or the competition, could you replicate what you did in that time frame, or would you do anything differently today if you were going to do that again?
It's a funding question, I think. So I think we'd bring a lot more money into it. And so in terms of creating it, as technologies evolved, the platforms have evolved. We're several iterations into kind of the base logic in our system, the way the data is handled, just to keep up with newer changes. So, restarting it now, you could create it. I think the key has been more creating positive networks and the ability to go out and do the services. The platform is a great underlying technology. And I think we could do that again in that time frame, but I don't know that you can fast track developing the network. We've seen a lot of companies try, even with our technology, and locally it works well. At a national level, it's just a whole different game. Yeah. And so I think with the timing that we got into the market and the technology and everything else, I think that was kind of a unique time for us to be able to scale up in a way that would be a lot harder to do now.
Got it. And you mentioned Quest earlier. For either through work or wherever, I remember signing up. But yeah, what does the competition look like for you guys? Is it very competitive? Are you having to go to bat against these groups on pricing, on structure, on cost? How does that look?
Yeah, in some markets, it's the insurance drives the price, so there's not price competition necessarily. It's more service competition and technology. For the national accounts, it's really become relational and then technology, meaning I have a relationship with somebody in the company, so they're willing to give us a look, and then I have the APIs and other, right, the kind of way to integrate with their system automatically for ordering and scheduling and tracking and updating, which are what the APIs are. Are those established enough to be able to help them save time, make their process easier, make their training easier, whatever it may be internally, where they make a business case for utilizing a system like ours. So we do have some national competitors. There are a lot of regional competitors. We don't really compete as much with the regional guys because they don't tend to have the technology or the reach for the companies that we're going after. So it really is the more national providers like a Quest or others. And some of the things that we differentiate on, Quest has a lot of good things that they're doing, and a huge lab. Obviously, they've got an arm that just does blood draws. But they're such a large organization that it makes them less nimble in their technology and their ability to apply to specific needs. So we're able to come in and do that as a smaller organization, create really specific processes for organizations that need it. And I think we've been very successful in terms of the teams that we've hired. So kind of another fortuitous opportunity, back in 2013, we decided to go officeless. We had an office, beautiful space, and thought, the people here are good, but we can get, if we want the best talent possible, it needs to not be confined by geography. And so we decided to try to not have an office. That worked out incredibly well, meaning that the folks that we have are self-directed. There's really clear things that they need to get done, so we don't need to micromanage them. They feel a sense of team, which works well. And so we've been able to find really great people, which means that as a differentiator, we also our error ratios and things are just much lower competitively than others, at least with the data that we have, and that's built great relationships.
Yeah,
for us.
That's great. So you were doing remote working before it was cool, before COVID,
right?
I guess,
so when
right?
COVID hit, we were already remote. We have people in 11 states, I think 11, 12 states. As far as administrators, we have our contractors in every state, but administrators, I think, in 11 states. So yeah, COVID came and we didn't have to shift at all, which was great.
That's great. So when I'm curious, Ryan, on the investment that came from that group, how have you thought about, taking investor capital? I mean, I guess what advice would you have when you do things at BYU, like bringing on $250,000, splitting ownership into perpetuity potentially, thinking about that dynamic of control?
Yeah.
Like what was that like for you, and what advice do you have around taking capital into a new venture?
Yeah, very different personalities and experiences, I think, that kind of drive the answer to that question. For me, I love input, but I also like somebody making the final decision, and I prefer that it's me. Call it arrogance or whatever. But yeah, I've never looked at giving away a majority interest in a company. In fact, even that investor had a really small minority interest as a result of that. So I think that there's real value, right? Money creates opportunity. Properly utilized, it can scale things faster. It can build better teams. Certainly, we've seen a lot of people just waste money that they get. And I know a number of individuals who have brought in money, ended up in a minority position, and been pushed out of their companies, as I'm sure most entrepreneurs do. So for a lot of reasons, I've just decided, and we raised some capital to start Vanguard Genetics as well from a private wealthy investor. But both of these investors have stayed pretty silent in the process and allowed us to just do what we do and pay dividends out when they're there and keep them apprised, on a kind of a yearly basis. So for me, not having somebody micromanage it and building has been really my goal. I think if I'm talking to an individual starting a company, they have an opportunity to take money, do it. If it looks like $1 billion company and you can scale it, the comment I hear people say is 1% of $1 billion is a lot better than 100% of 100,000. Right. And I agree with that. I just haven't had that experience. And so for me, having management control of the company and the ability to make decisions has been kind of a key. And this maybe broadens the question, but part of that is the work-life balance. So I'm not necessarily trying to build billion-dollar companies or $100 million companies and spend 90 hours a week doing that, right? I want to spend the time that I need. And it was busy in the early time, but now I've got a lot of flexibility, so I can work 10 hours a week or 20 hours a week or go on vacation with my kids or, take them up skiing for a couple of days a week. That's much more valuable to me than a $100 million company, right? And so the money that I took in was to build to that opportunity, to have the flexibility, more than it was to scale it out of the park, which I think is just a different approach to it.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think to your point, it depends on personality, because some people, entrepreneurship, the end goal is to kind of have a lifestyle business, right? To be able to work 10, 20 hours a week and do whatever you want. And on the other side of the spectrum, it's I want to build $1 billion business. I want to be the guy, with the big, I don't know, maybe it's an ego thing. I'm trying to figure that out right now as well. But we mentioned earlier, built and sold 4 companies. So we've talked about MediPro, we talked about Intermountain. You mentioned Alliance, and then I've got a couple, Elite Fitness, IPS. So what else has kind of been part of your entrepreneurial ventures thus far?
I mean, a lot of it is opportunity, being opportunistic as we're building these companies. So we have this baseline platform, case management system that's at the base of MediPro, and we decide we want to find other business channels that we can utilize our mobile collectors in. And we think, well, genetics is up and coming in the early 2000s. So I had my business development manager at the time reach out to all the genetic labs in the country and find one that had great scientific folks, but really no market concept, how to get it to market and build that market. And we said, we'll come in and do that. We'll partner with you and do the collections where needed and provide technology and build kind of a distribution channel, business to business. And so we did that, and we helped that company build to the point where we helped them with a private equity sale, found a business broker, and did that. But at the same time as we were doing that, we had one of our teams say, I want to do a direct-to-consumer DNA lab. And so I took a majority interest in that, provided the technology. We built this direct-to-consumer DNA company where the partner we were working with, who was processing the DNA, we'd send the business to them, and we were just kind of working on the front end to gather the business, right, the direct-to-consumer side. So we built that up for 3 years and sold it off. So that was another kind of smaller business, but something that helped one of my development folks and another one of my operations people kind of have something that they were working in, some way for them to build while still maintaining control managerially and kind of strategically over that project. Yeah. And then we had another one where Intermountain Paramedical, and then another company called IPS National. Again, using the same platform, we were doing collections for the anti-aging market, almost exclusively. Physicians and others that are doing in-home testing for things like human growth hormones and other things that need constant monitoring for health purposes. And so that market, we were doing at-home collections, and then after several years, sold that business channel off. So it's kind of all from the same root, or stem, and just finding what opportunities in the market and how do we use that to help continue to fund our business. Going back to what we talked about earlier, rather than going to outside money, can we take a business channel that isn't really necessarily where we want to be long term, but has some good opportunity, build it up for a couple of years, use that to raise capital, and that's been successful for us. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, very opportunistic and smart. With Alliance DNA or Vanguard, right now I think what's in vogue for a lot of, I think you did a lot of CrossFit. You seem like you're in shape. But from a medical or blood testing, testosterone, is that something that people can get done? Like if I'm a 30-year-old guy, I want to know my testosterone levels, my blood work, cholesterol, like is that something that's outsourced through like a Vanguard or Alliance right now, or has that been rolled up into something else at this point? Yeah, when we sold that off and we were just doing the collection side of it, the specimen collection side, doing blood draws, the lab, even that we were working with at the time, wasn't involved in that. It was other labs like Quest Diagnostics that do the actual processing. So you can go out and get that done. Our MediPro is headed to a conference later this week, the largest anti-aging conference, a group called A4M, and looking again at doing specimen collection. But in terms of processing and providing the human growth hormones or something like that, that's a big question. I mean, that's kind of its own question mark. I don't use that myself right now. I was into CrossFit. We invested in a CrossFit company that was sold later, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of its own market. I leave that to the physicians that monitor it. Yeah, sure thing. Well, so what's next for MediPro? I mean, it sounds like you've been able, from that initial raise, you've been able to bolt on some other businesses, and it doesn't sound like you've had to go out for your outside capital. But what's next for you guys, and where do you see the future? Yeah, so I think MediPro's really scaling right now. I mean, it's 17 years old from 2006. And we've kind of hit our stride in the sense that we were building that network for a lot of years. We were keeping busy, but moving outside of large insurance companies to clinical trial organizations and others. We've got some great sales folks now, really experienced operational people, and are getting more of the message about what we really offer with the technology and the service network and our not only our reach, but the quality of service. We have some unique kind of quality management systems that help us maintain that quality network as well. We take good care of our examiners in the field, the folks that are doing the collections, so they want to be a part of the network and have a good reputation because of that. So I think we're really looking right now over the next 5 years at just continuing to scale that, continue to bring on new markets, expand in the clinical markets, certainly in the specialty lab markets. It's a unique time in the sense that things like CRISPR and gene editing are really hitting their stride. The first FDA-approved CRISPR editing for sickle cell anemia came out a couple of days ago. That approval did, and a lot of that, whether it's reviewing your blood test for markers associated with cervical cancer or breast cancer or neural degeneration, to be able to tell if you have Alzheimer's a decade before we could previously tell. We're working with a lab out of BYU actually right now that's got that up and coming. So we see MediPro as a way to get that to market. They've got the technology, but they need a network of folks to go draw your blood. And if you do it at home, you're increasing diversity in terms of the population that you're getting the blood draws from. You're increasing participation because it's certainly easier for you than standing in a patient service center for an hour, right, waiting for your turn in line. Somebody's coming to your home or your place of work. So we see a lot of opportunity with these up and coming genetic testing companies and healthcare companies, at home testing, right, and even COVID helped push that in terms of at home healthcare. So we intend to be a really integral part of that push towards at-home healthcare.
Yeah, that's amazing. And if I don't know how much, that sounds like not very much direct to consumer that you're doing with MediPro, but if I'm a consumer and I'm concerned about my health or long-term, I want to see some of these markers or understand. I mean, what do you recommend just being in the space? Like, how should somebody approach that? Is it just going, because I've typically gone to my physician, my doctor, whatever, and it's like, it seems like what they're doing is a very baseline palette of markers. But and on the other side of the spectrum, you can go to a specialist and get like the 150 with testosterone and all the things you mentioned. But like, what are you doing personally? What would you advise for people who want to, get a better idea of how they're doing from a health standpoint?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of different physicians out there that focus on different things, right? Specialists, as you said, that are doing just general health care, and they're going to look at you and say, yeah, you're healthy, your heart's working right now, right? We don't need to do anything. There are others in the anti-aging market that really focus on bone density and how to protect that, or, managing how your eyes are working or your health and energy levels. And so I think going to the experts in those fields, what I would say is stay away from the fringe. There's always, even well-licensed people on the fringe. But if you look at really kind of recognized organizations like the Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins University, right? Do your research, find out what is really been properly tested and validated, right, with clinical trials and other things, and then find people that support that, right, that understand it, that are doing their own research in physicians, and see what works for you. Just like with building businesses, I just don't think that there's a one size fits all for anything, right? I don't think that because I took 5 steps to build a company, I can tell you what those are and you can do it. I mean, there are certainly things like have money, right, have an idea, and there are ways to develop concepts that make sense. But in terms of making the business work, it's a lot of grit, it's a lot of risk, it's a lot of opportunity, it's a lot of luck, and just getting out and networking the best you can. And I think health is like that as well. My wife's gone on to get to become nationally licensed in health and wellness because she really cares about that as well. And as she does that, I learn even more about the fact that there's just so much information you have to figure out. Try something that's safe. See if it works for you, right? If 9 days a week doesn't work because you have a bum knee, work out, 6 days a week or 5 days a week or something, right? I should say 9 times a week, doesn't work for you, then find what does. And I think the same thing's true with whether it's testosterone or it's vitamins, customized vitamins, or anything else. I think the same thing's true.
Yeah, makes sense. We talked about a little bit before, a little bit on this podcast, but your role at BYU, what is your role right now? How are you helping students at the university, and then maybe one or two things that you feel like you're trying to instill in the students from an entrepreneurial standpoint?
Sure. Yeah. So right now I'm part of what's called the Founders Board. There was an Associates Founders Board, but essentially individuals that the entrepreneurial program at BYU has a learn, earn, return is kind of their concept. And so you learn at the school, you go out, you earn, and then you come back and you give back. And probably 10 years ago, I got involved in the giving back community, which is this founders program. And essentially, you're involved in judging and mentoring. I take on a student every summer who's got a business concept that's already been kind of vetted by other programs at BYU, and now they're trying to get it to market. So I work with them through the summer to get it to market. At the end of the summer, they make a pitch to raise capital. And one of those companies, I think, is in a $100 million funding round right now. The other one is much earlier stage that we worked with this summer. And there are others previously that are in kind of the middle of those. So that's the piece that I do. If I'm invited, I'll go and speak to a class or something and talk about it. And I've done that a number of times. But a lot of it is just being active in the community and visible to say, happy to mentor, to hear your idea, to help build a business concept, to help talk about what's worked in terms of getting it to market, or just be a sounding board and listen to where you want to go. Sometimes I can connect people with a mobile app developer or something that's worked well for me, right, or software concept. And so it's being a part of that community. And then we typically all give some money to the school as well to help the programs there.
Yeah, good for you. I mean, it's so valuable, not only for students, but just for budding early entrepreneurs to have a mentor. And it's something that I've seen a lot of younger companies do, is bring on advisors or board advisors or people who are willing to give back of their time because they've had success, and you're one of those individuals. So yeah, it's really, really great what you're doing, Ryan. RHJ Enterprises, how would you describe that?
That's just a management organization for the other ones. So for me, we decided that building companies, it was too hard to start up leasing and payroll for every company and file it with every state, especially when you're multi-state. So we thought, let's create a company that just focuses on that. So RHJ is really a shell organization to buy, sell, and run payroll for the other companies that we have.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So it's nothing unique by any means.
Okay. Got it. How many employees do you have now, Ryan, across your?
Yeah. So administrative employees, we have maybe 15 to run the organizations. And then we've got a network of about 13,000 phlebotomists that are around the country. So most of it is contractors that we work with as needed. And then we have a pretty small administrative team, which again is one of my goals. Always, if we can have an efficient administrative organization, then there's a lot more of a sense of team. You get to a point where if you need 100 people, you have 100 people. But for us, if we can keep it efficient and keep the numbers down administratively, then we're spending way more time building the company and far less time kind of micromanaging the people.
Yep.
That's I've had those experiences, and not my favorite way to spend my time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, digging in there a little bit, I think the goal of an entrepreneur is to be able to scale and do it efficiently so that they can go from doing everything themselves to focusing on the business and kind of the critical items.
Yep.
How have you been able to successfully navigate that from your early days to scaling and making sure your role is not bogged down in the mundane things that maybe aren't as important for you to be working on?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think that there's a natural piece to that, and somewhat personality. Natural in the sense that as you grow, you're able to hire more people and they can take on additional roles. Personality in the sense that you have to not be someone who needs to be involved in everything. So for me, the natural growth and hiring people to take on payroll or HR or case management or operations. I mean, at the beginning, you do everything because you're the guy. Or the gal, right? And you're the one that takes care of it. And I remember, I think the second employee we had with our first company, so it would have been really early 2000s, and she came in and said, "What's behind? What do I need to start with?" And I said, "What do you mean? There's nothing behind, right? We work 10 hours a day if we need to and do everything because that's what you do." Now, as we've hired more people and they've taken those roles on, I also have just a personal mentality that you hire people, you put them in the right spot, and then you let them go to work. You have to trust them. If you don't trust them, you're going to just drive yourself crazy. So we've been fortunate to find really good people and make those hires that have been successful. And you're not going to get it right every time, but I would say 90+% of the time we've been fortunate that we have people that we have for a long time. Part of that too, I think, goes with what your tolerance level is for 90-hour work weeks, right? Along with the micromanaging and everything else. What are your goals? And so for me, mine's family time and this balance. I like building things. I like working with our staff and teams, but ultimately this is a means to an end, and the end is family time. And so, as I'm able to hire other people and say, okay, I trust you, even if you don't trust yourself yet, right? I trust you. I'm here to give you support. But I'm out for 2 weeks, right? We're going to Rome to go take the family out, or we're going to go on a ski trip or something. And so I think having that as a goal also kind of drives the transition, where you're trying to build people in as quickly as you can. And sometimes that even means that we give up some income because we say, I want this person to do that because I don't want to be spending 20 hours a week doing that role, right? So I'll take less income for a little while rather than hoarding it all and being the guy for everything.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That's great. At what point did you know you wanted to focus more on family, travel, and it sounds like more of a lifestyle than focusing all in on the business? Because I think we talked about it before. I think some folks are like, I'm just going to give up all of that for 10, 15 years and then try to catch up, right? Yeah. And I think that's the temptation. Like for me personally, yeah, I'm like, well, what if I just work really hard for 10 years and then, but how have you found that balance in your life?
Yeah, and I have to kind of preface that. And this, I think, is really the key part of any of these discussions, right? All the business is what it is, and it works or it doesn't. But I think the key is, what's your end kind of character goal? Where do you want to end up? To answer the first part of that question, the family, I've sort of always seen, school, you go on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then you come home, you get married, and family's it. I didn't think when I was younger, here's the career that I want, and I want to be a career guy. So I think that's kind of always been ingrained in the back of my mind. But to your point, when you start a business, it's easy to get sucked in all the time and to say, this is for the family, right? I'm working 100 hours a week for the family because we want them to have opportunities. And it just, I think, took time and experiences to sit around and say, well, what's for the family, right? That my kids need me to have a bigger car. They need a bigger house. Some of that came from traveling to other countries. And you go to Africa. I took one of my boys to Tanzania a few years back. We climbed Kilimanjaro, which was fantastic, with some cousins and others. And you see these people that have financially nothing, and they're as happy as can be, which is just this fascinating concept, because in the West, the concept is you make more money, you have more opportunities, you create happiness. And that just doesn't hold true. And we all know plenty of people that have endless amounts of money and are miserable. And so some of it was that. Some of it was traveling and seeing others when they were younger, trips to Mexico and some of the poorer areas there in South America. And then also knowing individuals that had, again, a lot of money and weren't happy. Part of it, and a big kind of shift for me, where I finished that transition, I think largely, was 10 years ago. We had our youngest son with a genetic disorder. He was born with a genetic disorder where he didn't have an immune system. People will remember from the 80s the bubble boy disease. So born without an immune system, we didn't realize that until 4 months in, when he'd already had some just basic things that were out there that our bodies would fight off, and he wasn't able to. So at 9 months, he passed away. And I spent months, our family went up to the Ronald McDonald House, which supports families who are kind of living at the hospital with kids in not Salt Lake, in Seattle, Washington, about 10 years ago. and sitting there working, and our company's growing really well. I'm making more money than I've ever made. And I'm sitting in the hospital on a laptop, and my son's, probably not going to live, and realizing, and sort of asking yourself that question. Here are these two options. What's value? What's real value in life? And realizing that, the money will take care of itself. From my perspective as a person of faith, I think the Lord takes care of that piece of it, where we have sufficient for our needs, right? We have enough. But the question of what's enough is where the personality comes in, where you have to say, is enough for me to live to be okay with a smaller house, to be okay with one car, right? To be okay with biking to work sometimes, or whatever that is. And I think at that point, it was just, that question became really visceral for me. And I said, yeah, we've got sufficient for our needs. It's time to shift away from 80-hour weeks or whatever it was, 70-hour weeks, and just spend more time somewhere else. And that's where I kind of intentionally started hiring more people, cutting my own salary to hire more people to fill in, to say, let's do quarterly trips, and let's do weekends away, and let's do, 2-3 ski days a week, and let's do the things, because the kids will go away and I can't tell you how much money my dad made as a kid. And the reality, I don't care, did we live comfortably? Sure. But had we lived in an apartment or something, which we did while we were building a house once as a kid, that was just as much fun as living in the big house that they built. It just doesn't matter. What matters is I remember my dad spending time with me. At a point, I remember my mother reading books to us every night, right? And so I sort of look at that with my own children and say, okay, that's what's got to happen. If I'm at work when I should be home reading a book, my priorities are off, And that's different if you don't have food in the cupboard, right? I want to preface that and say, absolutely, if you're at a point where there's an emergency and you got to work 2 jobs, you do that because you're responsible to take care of your family. But again, sufficient for our needs. My cupboards are full, my fridge is full, I've got a roof over my kid's head. Now the priority is family, right? So it's a long answer to the transition.
It's amazing. No, and that's why I love doing these things, is to hear insights from individuals like you, Ryan, and very sorry for your experience you went through. It sounds like you learned a lot
powerful experience
from that, and thank you for sharing those insights. I think it's incredibly valuable, and I do think that there's starting to be a little bit of a shift with social media. I think fathers are, at least that I'm in the circles that I'm kind of in, is I think people are starting to understand, what is success in life? Like, how do you measure that? Yeah. I think you hit it right on the head in terms of where your priorities are. And it as an early entrepreneur, I mentioned we started our company a year ago. There is always that time where it's you got to survive, make or break. Like, you got to keep the lights on. But I love what you said. Once you kind of get through that, it's taking a step back and understanding where you really want to make memories and experiences for you and your family. So. Touching a little bit on money, but on the investing side. So you've had successful businesses, exits. How do you think about investing maybe outside of MediPro personally right now?
Yeah, I think the best advice I've ever heard is invest in what you know. Anytime I've ever lost money, it's investing in something I didn't know. I may have done all the research I could and had background checks on people and, all of that, but, and everybody's going to have things that don't work. But if you're doing it, then you learn from it and you move on. If somebody else is doing it, it's a different set of questions. You say, were they honest about it? We raised some capital and put some money into an investment early on. That was a real estate investment but I didn't understand the market enough and felt like it was really solid. And it lasted about a month before just the bottom fell out from underneath it. Oh. The market crashed, and the person running it had over-identified assets significantly. She ended up in prison for 3 years, right? That kind of a situation. Whoa. But we'd run background checks. We'd reached out to other professionals in the field. We'd done all those things that felt like the right thing to do. But I come back to it and go, in my situation, I've got companies that I can invest in and scale. And I get a lot of people saying, well, will you invest in this or that? And I just think, for me, if I understand it, that's a market that I can invest in, because I can see when it starts to go off track, right? It makes sense. And I say, okay, this is no longer a safe bet. Where otherwise, even if I get information from others, they're not sitting on the investment the rest of the time, right? So they don't say, well, you should now think about pulling out. I've sort of paid them for their consulting and now they're done. So that said, would I invest in the stock market? Sure, because you can manage that, right? Are there portfolio investments in real estate groups like a Fundrise or something? Yeah, right. And the other piece is you're investing in individuals. So maybe you're learning something like a real estate market and you've got someone that you have a good relationship with. And so you put some minor funds into that. But I think as you're learning it, then it's just sort of really starting small, no matter how exciting the opportunity is, because the other reality is there's always another opportunity. If you ever feel like it's the only opportunity, you haven't done your homework.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the advice I'd say is
invest
in yourself first, invest in things you know, and then if you're going to go outside of that, start really small.
Yeah, that's great advice. You mentioned travel with your family. Are there any other habits, Ryan, that you guys try to be very intentional about in your family to try to create more unity or traditions within your family?
Yeah, travel's a big one for us, getting outside and doing things. In the summer, maybe it's jumping on some jet skis or something and just spending time. And it's not just with immediate family. We're really intentional around being a gathering place for our extended family. My wife comes from a family of 10 siblings.
Wow.
Or total kids. And so there's a lot of family here. And any time that we can gather people together, even if we're the one, because of just opportunity that we've been given, if we're paying entirely to rent a big cabin so that we can get all the family there, that's money well spent. In a year, you won't remember how much it cost, maybe two. But the kids and everyone really appreciate the relationships built with cousins and family. So that's a big piece of it for us. Always spend time with local family when you can.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. Well, last couple questions and we'll wrap this up. Just in terms of advice, and you've touched on some advice already. It's been great. But for anyone starting a business or, in the earlier days of business, are there any specific pieces of advice or just a single, the biggest thing that you've learned over your career that's like, you look out for this or try to implement this? Anything that you'd add to the conversation we've had thus far?
Yeah, it's interesting because, as I say, I don't know that there's just a process for business and business generation, other than surround yourself with people that have more experience than you do and know more than you do. Hire people that know more than you do, and be okay with that, right? Be okay with learning from the people that report to you, because you're in a much better situation if you're not trying to be the subject matter expert on everything, right? I'm not a scientist. I own a genetic lab. I'm the primary partner, the majority owner in a genetic lab, and people say, tell me about genetics. I know basics about it, but I can't pick up a phone and do customer service for our genetic lab. That's not my role, right? I act as CFO, and I strategically create partnerships because that's what I know. And then we have really great people doing the science piece of it, a scientific director doing the customer service aspect of it, just really talented people doing that. So I think the more you network, the more questions you ask, and then ultimately you have to be willing to take a risk. We run into a lot of people who say, I just don't know what the right timing is. And I think that's a fair question, especially if you have a family where you're saying, there's risk for more than just me. But if you're a student and you're in college, your risk is pretty non-existent. I mean, the worst that's going to happen is, you lose some time, maybe a few $100 that you started, the idea on or something. So, as early as you can, if you're interested in entrepreneurialism, don't wait until you have enough money or enough time, because that just doesn't exist. And I thought that, I started the first company with nothing, the second company with a little more, the next company with a little more. And every time I do it, it's not like you have enough money to start that business. You could always use more. You could always do more. So you just do it. You stop, you look around, you say, what are issues that I care about? What bothers me? And maybe it's something that you run into in your living room in the morning and you say, there's a better version of this that could exist. Or maybe it's, something like a scheduling system like we have. This seems backwards or outdated. Let's try something different. So you find something that matters to you so that you can explain it to others. You have to have a personal interest in it. And then you just start and you go down the path. The earlier the better, because again, it's a lot less risk than when you have 5 kids and a house, a mortgage to take care of.
Yeah, 100%. One question you mentioned, and having an idea, I've had ideas and I'm like, oh, this is a pain point in our business, or this is something that would be great. Then you do some quick research, like, oh, there's already like 1 or 2 competitors. I'm sure when you started, I mean, MediPro Quest exists, like, you had, but
Right.
how do you, as somebody with an idea and a concept, not get discouraged knowing that there's already competition? Like, is it just a different way to do it? Innovation? Like, how do you break through that? Because that initial disappointment's like, oh, well, someone already came up with this, so forget it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've really encouraged. So I have one of my sons, my youngest son, who's still with us, who is a manufacturing expert. Like, he was born building 3D models. He's 3 years old and he builds like 3D castles. I'm like, I don't even know how you did that. And it's just in his head. And so he's one that I always encourage, come up with an idea. We've bought it or helped him buy some 3D printers. He'll hate that I said that because I think he actually paid for them himself. So he bought some 3D printers. And he just builds things and ideas. And we're talking about a litter box, and we say, how can we make this better, right? That's a pain point for me. I love cats, and I hate the litter boxes that are out there. And so he's building 3D models, and we're kind of iterating on that. And we came up with the best version, and then found it on Amazon. And so that's one aspect of it, where if you've got something that's the exact same product, it's hard to create the same product and be successful. But when it's services or other ideas, you're doing something like a real estate, people have already raised money and bought houses, but it's partially relational business. And there's a technology aspect to it, and there's an information management piece to it in terms of how much information do people have, right? How accessible is that? And so I think for me, it really been in the service space, it's going and looking at it and believing, arrogantly or otherwise, that we can do this better than the competitors. So yeah, Quest is out there, but they're too big. And we can also exist as a small player for a long time before we matter to them. They may matter to us, but there's a lot of companies out there that are always looking for something different than already exists. And so if you get enough networking and you have enough discussions with these organizations, that's one of the things that the BYU program does really well, is say, get an idea, now go out and talk to a lot of people and get feedback. Don't build it first and then find out that it was the wrong idea. Get an idea, go talk to them about the idea, and find people so excited that they want to help pay you to build it, right? Because then you've nailed something on it. And so that's what it is we look at it and say, quality management is lacking. Let's build a better quality system. We can do that, right? The flexibility to really hone in on a business process is lacking because these companies are so big. Let's find the people that need that and do it. So there's always a way to improve a process or create a better process, I think, with at least with service companies, which is my experience.
Yeah, love it. Well, such good advice, Ryan. I don't think there's a better way to end. Thank you for sharing your story and the advice that you shared. I think this was incredibly insightful. So again, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Jason.
Thanks for listening to The Chase Hudson Show. If you liked what you heard, please leave me a review and subscribe to this podcast. Reviews really help us to find better guests and to improve the overall quality of the show. If you'd like to connect with me directly or want to learn more about investing in real estate, send me a DM on Instagram at @officialchasehudson. Again, we really appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.